On tonight's episode, we figure out if Jimmy Garoppolo is headed to the Cleveland Browns, and did 49er fans force Kyle Shanahan to get off of taking Mac Jones and instead taking Trey Lance? We're going to talk about that more next. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we're giving you our take down to the last second. It's Tuesday, which means I got my boy, So Real, Sunil, and we're talking about the 49ers. There's actually quite a bit to talk about. It's funny because you go into these shows sometimes during the slow time of the season and you figure out, what are we going to talk about tonight? It came pretty easy because there's still a lot of rumors swirling around the 49ers, and it's absolutely crazy. But before we get into all that, Sunil, how you doing, my man?
Dude, I'm doing fantastic. I'm loving how you must be, the new scout for the 49ers because you got access to the boardroom, my friend. That is a nice little setup right there. And mid-meeting.
Let's be clear about this. There's a former Jet scout who thinks he knows what's going on. I'm in 49ers headquarters, and I can tell you right now, he doesn't know squat about what we think of Trey Lance. And I say we because I'm a part of the organization. You understand me? Goodness sakes.
I stay out of that conversation from this point on. My name gets dragged into those conversations way too much.
That's so funny.
Pivot.
All right. Yeah. And we're done. All right. Let's ease into this show because we definitely have some really juicy topics that I want to get to a little bit later. But let's ease into the show because offensive line continues to be one of those conversations that people want to have, and really the biggest area of concern potentially for the 49ers. PFF comes out, and gotta love them. PFF, let's be clear about PFF. They do a fantastic job of getting conversations going. They are great for advanced stats, I believe, but some of their rankings are a little wild. They have the 49ers right now, and I'm not saying this one in particular, but just in general, their rankings are wild. And this is what sold me on it real quick, Sunil, before we get into it. It was a game, I think, against the Titans where Deebo Samuel went crazy that game. Jennings had like one catch for 19 yards or something like that. They gave Jennings a higher PFF than they gave Deebo, who was the star of the game. Him and A.J. Brown were going back and forth. So to me, it's a whole wild situation, but I digress. PFF has the 49ers offensive line ranked 14th in the league. What are your thoughts about those rankings?
So do you by any chance know what PFF ranked the 49ers offensive line last season at the end of the season?
I don't, but
I do. Can I tell you?
Oh yeah. Please tell me. Third. Oh.
So they had the 49ers offensive line. This is after the season, right? So after the play, not pre-season. This is from the play on the field, ranked third. So I want to use that as a rubric to however you felt like 49ers offensive line was last season. That's where PFF ranked them. So 14, based off of PFF, I don't know because I would assume that they maybe, I guess, are higher, I guess, than maybe some other people may believe. But I think this is actually a fair ranking, right? We're looking right middle of the pack. And the reason why I think it's fair is because the 49ers do have two virtual unknowns and literal unknowns that are playing on it. So when you have, 2 out of 5? So that's 40% of your offensive line literally haven't started a game in the NFL, or very, very few games in the NFL. I think that, to expect them to be ranked this is still top half of the league. That's saying a lot. And so do I believe they're going to end at 14? No, I personally believe that they're going to be a top 10 offensive line like they finished last season. But I do think that this is fair, right? There's a lot of question marks there, not because of lack of talent, but more because of lack of just unknown players, right? Jake Brendel and Aaron Banks are both slotted in to be starters from all indications. And both of those guys have started, Aaron Banks has started 0 games. Jake Brendel, I think, has started 3. And I don't know if even all of those were at center. So yeah, I think 14th is probably higher than probably most people would have ranked them with that many quote unquote unknowns on the offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, okay, again, PFF has some wild rankings, so I don't know how much I buy into this, and I guess I'm worried less about the rankings and more. Let me ask you this. If the 49ers finish, let's say this ends up where they end up being, consensus says they're around a middle of the pack offensive line. How far do you think the 49ers can go with a middle of the pack offensive line? Because I think that's a whole different conversation, right?
Yeah, and look, it's kind of a hard question to answer, Jesse, because it depends on what level their quarterback finishes at. Because, we just saw Joe Burrow with probably not a top 15 offensive line make it to the Super Bowl, right? So to me, it depends on Trey Lance. I just kind of said this on, Jack's channel right before this. If Trey Lance plays average, I think this team is a playoff team. If he plays good, I think that this team is a Super Bowl contender. If he plays great, I believe that this team is the Super Bowl favorites. And that's because of everything that's around him, not only on the offensive side, but the defensive side and the depth at every single position for this team. So if this team finishes middle of the pack for the offensive line, if Trey Lance is playing good to great, I think this team still, you see him in the Super Bowl. If he's not, then I don't think it's going to be because of the offensive line play. I think it's going to be based off of the quarterback play. I don't know if that directly answers your question, but that's kind of how
I feel it. I feel it. I've got to follow up to that, but I've got to address this because Pynor, my guy,
he's been MIA, bro.
Months.
Welcome back.
I was asking about this man in a space the other day, wondering if he was okay. I'm glad to see that he is back. Pynor, it's getting close to that time of season. I better start hearing from you a little bit more. Appreciate the heck out of you for tapping in. Appreciate everybody else for tapping in. We got Jamal in here. If you didn't catch Jamal was on Sunday with Grant. You can check him out. We've got No Border Sports in here. We got the Notorious Gab. We really have a whole slew of
who's who
greats in here.
Who's who?
Ooh, Jimmy to Seattle, yay or nay? We're going to talk about that. We'll actually talk about that. So I don't want to get into it now, but we'll definitely talk about it. Okay, so you say it's more based off of Trey Lance. My question, though, is how much is Trey Lance's success predicated on the offensive line? Because let's face it, you can have incredible weapons on the offensive side of the ball, up and down, wide receivers, running backs, quarterback. But if you have a bad offensive line, a lot of that's not going to matter. So how much of Trey Lance's success relies on that offensive line at least being, I don't know, competent?
I mean, so here's the thing. It depends on what they're competent at and what they're not competent at. So I think that the coach that 49ers have calling the plays and devising the schemes will play to the strengths of the offensive line. So I don't know if you need to have like this 5 all pros all up and down your offensive line to have the kind of success with what is around there. And I understand your point. I'm not trying to gloss over your point, Jesse. Obviously, if you have a very porous offensive line, you're not going to get much done. But even with a lower tier offensive line, like you saw with the Bengals this offseason or this last season, it's possible. It's possible. Obviously, it's going to limit maybe the type of plays that are called. You're probably not doing seven step drops. You're probably getting the ball out quicker and, managing the game a different way. But I really, truly believe this success. If this team isn't successful, Jesse, I don't think we're pointing at the offensive line and saying that's the biggest issue.
Yeah, okay, that's totally fair. That's totally fair. And I hope that you're right. We'll see. I mean, we did talk pretty in depth about it last week, and basically my whole point comes down to this. If it does end up being the offensive line, that's very frustrating because they had the golden ticket right there on their roster and they could have solved that issue and they chose not to. So, it is what it is. We'll see how the offensive line plays out when it's all said and done. But if they are middle of the pack, me personally, I think that's good enough to get it done. I really do. I think that as long as they are dominant in the run game, or can help this run game be dominant and have okay protection with Trey Lance, who's also very mobile, and knowing that Shanahan can dial up anything to basically pick apart a defense. To me, I think that's all they need. And the defense of the 49ers is really the strength of this team, regardless of how we slice it. And because of that, I think that they can go very, very far as long as that offensive line is right around middle of the pack. If it is top 10, then I mean we're cooking. We're looking at some really, really good things for this team. So they just have to be serviceable. They can't be a bottom 5, 8 offensive line. I think that's where disaster can strike. But I also don't think that they will be that. I think really, if you look at it, Sunil, and I think you and I have had these conversations, there's a lot of bad offensive lines in football. The 49ers, for as many question marks as they have, there are teams that have a lot more question marks along the offensive line. So we'll see how it plays out. But it is cool to see some rankings come out and something that we can talk about because to me, I'm actually interested in how do they come up with this ranking? You've got guys in Brindle and Banks who really haven't even played. So how are you ranking those guys? I'm very confused by that. So anyways,
you stole a couple of my thoughts right out, and it's great that we've been working together a lot because one, I was going to say, I don't even know how they come up with offensive line rankings because there's not really stats like tackles or fumbles or anything like that you could really, gauge it off of. So I'm assuming it's pressures and sacks given up and things like that, maybe some kind of rushing yards and stuff like that they might put into it. But another thing is, maybe there's probably like 3 elite offensive lines per year, but I would assume like 5 to 20, those 15 spots right there, I'm sure we're talking about minuscule, like tenths of a percent, the differences between those two. So I don't know how much offensive line rankings really play a role. Like I said, PFF had the 49ers ranked 3rd last season. And I don't think that too many people would think that the 49ers were the 3rd best offensive line last season, even though in PFF rankings they were.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Let's talk a little bit about Trey Lance. We have a couple topics coming up about the quarterback situation, and not just Trey Lance, but Jimmy Garoppolo as well. That being said, Trey Lance is staying back for an extra week to get in some extra work. I talked a little bit about this. I put out around a 7-minute clip talking about this and just about Trey Lance and his ceiling and his upside. But for you, when you heard this, what was your initial thought about Trey Lance sticking back for an extra week to get in some work with the team?
I mean, I just it gives me another feather in my cap of why I'm just so excited about this guy. It's just, there's not like, I think a lot of people may hear certain reports coming out of mini camp and things of that nature. And a lot of people are like, oh, see, he's like this. And I kind of temper those type of calls just because everything is set up at this point for quarterbacks to look good just because nobody's in pads, nobody's tackling. And it's really, a benefit. It's in favor of the offense to look good versus the defense look good. So, but the things that you can see as tangibles or intangibles from Trey is just amazing to me. I think the leadership that he's shown in the offseason, as far as the amount of work that he's putting in on his time with a multitude of different coaches, as well as the type of off-season activities he's been setting up for guys like Ayuk Jennings to come and work out with him in Southern California. I think that's amazing. The type of leadership that he's shown as far as being like asking for the numbers of the rookies coming in, making sure that he's part of that welcoming committee to make them feel comfortable. I think that's amazing. What he's been able to do as far as how he handles himself in the media, I think is just, amazing. Like everything that these categories, I'm rating him at A+ level of what he's been able to show. And now him, instead of, going off and maybe, taking a break and all that kind of stuff, he's like, no, I want to make sure that I could do everything in my power to have an amazing season this year. So I'm going to stick back with whoever's back here, maybe talk to the coaches, put in some more work at the facilities and things of that nature. To me, this is everything you're looking for in the leader and the starting quarterback of your team. For me, he's doing everything at an A+ level. Now, does that necessarily mean he's going to go out and be an all-pro quarterback? I don't know, because clearly we haven't seen it translate necessarily on the field because we haven't gotten a chance to see it. But as far as the things that we can see, it's amazing to me, man. A+ all around as far as what he's doing. Intangibles.
I have a follow-up question about that in a second. But before I get to that, Bomber, shout out to you, man. Sounds like you're on the mend, but you got pretty sick and whatnot. Doesn't sound like COVID, but just shout out to you, man. Prayers to you. Hopefully you're on the mend. Hopefully your whole gym's on the mend. I know how it is. You get in a jiu-jitsu gym or you get in an MMA gym, things spread like crazy there. You're in close quarters, a lot of sparring, a lot of grappling, and it's just the way that things work. So, there you go. And shout out to Jamal, my guy, becoming a new member. Appreciate you, Jamal. It means the world to me. All right. You talked about intangibles, and like I said, I had just recently thrown out a video yesterday about Trey Lance, talking a lot about that, actually. And this may be a tough question, but when I think of the things that you can measure accuracy, you can measure ball velocity, you can measure mobility, right? All the physical traits with a player. But you can't measure some of those intangibles. You can't measure how smart they are. You can't measure how good of a leader they are, how much they're picking up on the offense, those types of things. But you can start to see those things manifest, and you hear about those things. And with Trey Lance, you heard a lot about those quote unquote intangibles leading up to the draft. And they're starting to show, they're starting to manifest. Everybody is lockstep in what they're saying about this kid, even before he was a San Francisco 49er. And now that he is a 49er and he's the leader of this team, you're starting to see those things manifest. So the question to you is, what are you more confident in with Trey Lance? Are you more confident in his physical attributes, or are you more confident in some of those mental attributes / intangibles?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's a loaded question, because I think the mental side we've been able to see more than maybe the physical, just because of lack of opportunity to play. And I think both are very good, but I would say I think the mental, and I'm putting mental as far as work ethic, ability to want to be a student, and wanting, like, the want to get better, and those things I'm putting into the mental category, which is why I think that mental side is why I'm not worried about Trey. I think I can guarantee there will be some downs in Trey's play. He's going to make some bad throws. He's going to have some bad games. He's going to make some questionable decision making, just like all quarterbacks do early in their career and some throughout their career. What I know, or what I believe, I should say, is that Trey is constantly going to want to get better. He's going to put in the work to make sure that he doesn't make the same mistakes over and over again. And I think with the consistent opportunity that it seems like he's going to get now that the keys are passed to him, I just believe that we're going to see a constant evolution, that week after week, like the quarterback we see week 1 and the quarterback we see week 17 is going to be completely different as far as the level of play, because of all of the intangibles and mental aspect that he does bring to the game.
Absolutely. Rad is chocolate. I don't know where that came from. Rad's one of my real life best friends. So Rad and I are always going to be great. He just handles the Lion side of the channel, right? We have a 49er side. We have a Lion side. We try to get together as, once a week. It's kind of tough during the off season, But no, he's definitely not chopped liver. He's one of my best friends in real life. So I'm not sure where that came from. But it's funny that you say that, Sunil, because I said the same exact thing. I said, I know it sounds crazy, but I actually agree with the mental aspect and the intangible aspect more than I do the physical aspect, which is it's insane because you do see the physical side of things. And when you look at it, I think as a runner, he can be borderline top 5 in this league. When you look at all the quarterbacks, as when you look at just arm strength, I believe he's borderline top 5 with his arm strength in this league. So physically, you add it all together, he could be a top 5 quarterback physically. But if he's even better mentally, it really is, the sky is the limit for Trey Lance. I said that I think when it's all said and done, that he'll be worst case the second best quarterback out of the draft class that he came in, and will end up being a top 7 quarterback, bona fide top 7 for many, many years. But I think the ceiling is actually higher than that. I don't know if he'll reach that. We'll see. But he really does have everything that he needs just internally. That's not including having Shanahan, having a talented roster, and all those other things that are also in place. I don't know, man. I don't want to act as if this kid could be the best quarterback in the league and plant my flag on that. But if it ended up happening, I also wouldn't be shocked. Like, that's how confident I am in Trey Lance being very, very good in this league.
Yeah, and you look at the makeup of him, like he comes from obviously not a Power 5 conference, right? He comes from NDSU. Even though they've had success in putting quarterbacks into the NFL, the level of competition that they're playing isn't the same level as, Joe Burrow from LSU. So he has that I need to prove myself type of mentality. But he doesn't have the chip on the shoulder like a guy like Baker Mayfield, right? And not to throw Baker Mayfield under the bus. I mean, it's just a different type of attitude. Trey Lance could have that same type of, attitude where it's like just, very flippant and just like me against the world type of mentality. He doesn't necessarily have that. He has that silent confidence, though, that whatever you're saying about me isn't gonna affect the way that I feel about me. And I think that's like that silent confidence that he's just willing to put in the work, and he's motivated to prove to the world. He said it. I need to prove to the world that I'm as good as I know that I am to you. And I think that's just a great mentality to have. He's not somebody who everything was handed to him. So I like that because that's where the work ethic and the drive will always come from. But he's also somebody who doesn't need negative energy to fuel him, which I think is a good quality to have as well.
Absolutely. And 49er Jeff, I agree with you. I don't like the way that he seeks out contact sometimes. And that is something that he's going to have to work through and I would say mature through, right? As he plays and realizes how big and physical and fast these guys are on this level. But the kid, I mean, this is kind of who he is. I don't know if you've seen, if you guys haven't seen, go seek it out. His high school highlights were insane. And even on the defensive side, he laid the lumber. The kid he is a football player, period. So I agree with you. That's something that's going to have to be worked out over time. While he's young, I'm not as worried about it, but over time, for sure, he has to get better at that. And learning to slide, probably a good start. I would imagine that that's something, hopefully, that he sees and his team sees, and they've got to be able to figure that out. Definitely.
I love that he's tapping into a guy like Steve Young. I know we talked about this last week as well, but Steve Young is somebody who had the same type of mobility or a similar type of mobility, who had to deal with a lot of concussions. So I think he's going to be very much in Trey Lance's ear and be like, look, man, I know you're big and strong and feel like nothing will ever phase you, but take it from me, somebody who's had multiple concussions in my career, that it's better to slide than just fight for that extra yard. Pick your battles.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, Jimmy G's actually a good example of that. How did Jimmy G get hurt? The trajectory of Jimmy G's career changed because he wanted to pick up 2 extra yards, right? And I'm not saying that Jimmy G ever had the talent to be a bona fide top 10 guy, but I think he could have been around that Kirk Cousins area. I think he could have been a top 12 guy pretty consistently. And I think a top 12 guy probably could have won a Super Bowl in 2019, maybe even last year. So the trajectory of his career definitely changed because of him wanting to pick up an extra yard or two. And unfortunately, it didn't work out well for him, right? And so we see really a different player from a mentality standpoint, a mobility standpoint, than what we saw prior to the injury. And it's unfortunate. It really is. Speaking of Jimmy G looks like the only team, in my opinion. Now, you may come up with another team, but in my opinion, the only team that seems like a viable option for Jimmy G right now is the Browns. And I don't know if you've heard the reports, but unless a trade is made, of course, Carolina could remain an option. But it seems like they're seeking Baker Mayfield to play for Carolina. Pretty tough. And they're trying to get it done before they exit their mini camp because they're trying to get him to see and work with the team a little bit. So with that news coming out, what are your thoughts? Do you think Baker ultimately ends up in Carolina? And if so, regardless, if Baker's gone, do you think Jimmy G to the Browns makes sense?
All right, so there was a lot there. So first question, do I think Baker goes to Carolina? I mean, so they would have 2 fifth-year contracts that they're on the hook for, right? Because Darnold's on his 5th year, Baker's on his 5th year. And they would have the 1st and the 3rd pick in the draft that same year on there. And aren't they still paying for some other quarterbacks too that they got rid of?
Probably Cam. I think that's where the hangup is, by the way. I think the hangup is trying to figure out if Cleveland is going to take on a big chunk of that salary. I think that's where the hangup is right now.
Right. And then Cleveland is awfully on the hook for a quarterback that may or may not be able to play this season as well. So that's a lot. I mean, and then Jimmy's contract is also big. So first of all, let's answer it. Do I think Baker goes to Carolina? I would have to say I don't know, because I don't know how much of an upgrade Baker is over Sam Darnold, like, necessarily, right? I mean, I guess Baker definitely has had more success than Sam Darnold, but I also think Baker has had the opportunity to play on better teams than Sam Darnold. So I think that's like a wash there. However, do I think Jimmy would be a good fit for the Browns? And I don't know if you remember, I'm sorry. I remember, Jesse. I was...
That's twice now. That a third time, and you're that's it.
Bro, it's back to back, bro. It's back to back. You got to give me some leeway, because I go straight from Jack to you, so it's kind of like an hour of saying Jack and then like getting it out of my mind. I just need to hit the power reset button. But I thought that the best fit for Jimmy was the Cleveland Browns in the offseason. I thought that would be the first place that the 49ers should try to go to make a trade, and Cleveland should be looking to that, because I think what Kevin Stefanski does over there with the Browns and what their strengths are as far as a really good defense and a strong running game plays into exactly what Jimmy's skill set is as well. So for me, I think that would be a great fit. Do I think it's possible? I don't think it's possible unless the 49ers are willing to pay some of that contract. And I think that if that is the case, then I think the 49ers would just be better than just cutting Jimmy versus whatever draft pick that they're going to get. Unless they're going to get a top 2 draft pick, meaning 1st or 2nd round, to take on some of that money, I wouldn't do it. I would just rather cut him, take all of that $25 million like you've spoken about on this show, roll it into next season, versus taking on some of that contract just for a 3rd or 4th round pick from Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally fair. There's a 26th lawsuit now, or woman coming forward on this whole Deshaun Watson situation. The chances of him playing, I think, are getting slimmer and slimmer, literally by the female that's coming forward and talking about the situation. So I think that the Browns need another quarterback. The Browns, by the way, even if they pay the full salary for Baker Mayfield, have $42 million in cap space. They literally could pay for all of Baker Mayfield's contract, all of what Watson cost them this year, all of Jimmy G's contract, and all of Jacoby Brissett's contract, and still have about $17 million to play with. So, yeah, I don't know.
How's that even possible with as much talent they have on their team?
It's crazy. It's crazy because every time they rework a deal, it's like $1 million. That's what the first year of the contract is. It's absolutely insane. But either way, I have to say, yeah, I think Jimmy to the Browns really is starting to make a lot of sense based off of that. And if Watson ends up getting suspended for a year or on the commissioner's exempt list, I really could see that happening. Now, what I'm not saying, though, is Jimmy gets traded to the Browns. Those are two very, very different things. And let's say the Browns do have to trade Baker Mayfield. Well, they're going to have to get rid of him regardless. But let's say they have to eat some of that money or a big chunk of that money. I think chances are they're going to go to the 49ers and say, listen, you got one team that's looking at Jimmy Garoppolo. We're not going to also pay his contract. No. You're going to have to do what we just had to do to get rid of our quarterback. You're going to have to pay a lot of his contract. And I think that would be a bad decision for the 49ers to do. So I think Jimmy does ultimately end up probably on the Browns. I just don't know if it comes via trade. So we'll see how it plays out. Jamal, you made a comment that you think Baker gets too much hate. And I wish I had it up on the camera to talk about. But my mouse is tripping out. But I was never a big Baker fan. I never liked him coming out of college. I was a huge Josh Allen guy. In fact, Rad and I, we used to have a podcast. It was all audio. It was no video. I think I still have the audio somewhere that I could find. But I said after 5 seasons that Baker would be out of the NFL. That was my bold prediction. I just didn't think that he had the skill set to last. I thought that coming out of college, he was throwing to a lot of wide open receivers. And when I watched what Josh Allen had to do, he had to throw it in extremely tight windows, double coverage, crazy weather. I just thought Josh Allen would be the clear-cut best quarterback out of that class. Now, I think I've been right about that, but the Baker thing, maybe it was a little over the top saying he'd be out of the league in 5 years, but also if, let's say he does get traded to Carolina and doesn't pan out, Baker's, to me, is not the type that is willing to be a backup somewhere. So if that's the case, he really actually could be out of the league in 5 years. And even though it sounded crazy 3 years in, it seems pretty not likely, but it's a possibility. All of a sudden that door is open that Baker could be out of the league.
It's not out of the realm. It's not out of the realm. I am interested to see, because you said, like, if Jimmy does get cut, I do think that Jimmy's going to have options, right? Somebody mentioned Seattle. I think Pittsburgh would be in the running for him. Clearly, the Browns would be a team that would be there, but it'd be interesting to see where Jimmy would want to go to. I still think out of all of those options that we just mentioned, the Browns is probably the best situation as far as team around him. But it would be interesting, because would Jimmy go after would he want to be in another situation where he knows it's temporary and they have the bona fide starter coming back possibly next season? Or would he want to go to a place maybe like Seattle, or a place like maybe, I guess Pittsburgh drafted somebody too, but maybe say like a Pittsburgh where he might be able to play multiple years as a starter in those situations?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what he ends up deciding that he wants to do. Jamal, I know it's hard being on that side of things because you only get so many characters to try to defend your take, and I get to just say whatever the hell I want. Hell, I don't even have to show your comment if I don't want to. But since you're my boy, I will. You said that he's had way too many head coaches and offensive coordinators, and he's been injured. Lots of change on a yearly basis on top of his injuries. I don't believe that he was set up for success in Cleveland outside of this year. But he got hurt, though. All right, here's what I'll say. I don't disagree with that. I think Cleveland was a dumpster fire, right? And he did some good things, especially early on. but ultimately his ego does get the best of him. It just does. I mean, he he's a lot like Kevin Durant in the sense that he feels like he has to go at everybody, but he's like Kevin Durant without the skill set. Like Kevin Durant's one of the best basketball
Or
players
the
of
accolades.
all time. And Baker Mayfield is a guy struggling to keep his job, and he's just firing shots at everybody left and right. And when you're a quarterback, especially at that position, if he was a wide receiver or defensive back, all right, probably get over it. But as a leader of a franchise, no, man, I don't want my quarterback to be that guy. I'm not with it. I don't like what he brings to the table mentally. I think physically he's overrated. I am all out on Baker Mayfield. I was before the draft, and I certainly haven't seen anything to change my mind about that. That's just my opinion, but I'm sure you and I can certainly talk about it more offline. And all good, getting us off topic, not a big deal. All right, to get us back on topic, though, we have two final topics to go over. Both of them were started by Jeremy Fowler of ESPN. And I think these are really, really good topics. But before we get to those, we've got 200 of you watching. Make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell notification so you never miss an episode. The link is in my description for Sunil's channel. Go tap in with him as well. Give him some love. He's here every single Tuesday. All right, let's hop back into it. Fowler basically came out and said that he believes that the 49ers got exactly what they needed out of this couple weeks of practice to be sold that Trey Lance, regardless of what Jimmy Garoppolo is doing, who they're going to continue to try to pursue a trade for, but even if he's on this roster, he believes that the 49ers have learned all that they need to learn about Trey Lance, and Trey Lance is the starter for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, this is different from what we've heard. We've heard a lot of opinions and those other things, but this is the first thing that I've heard from inside where the 49ers were, I don't know, I guess somehow auditioning Trey Lance to see if he could be the guy, and that he's given them enough information now. They've seen it enough on the field to believe that he is the guy. This might be the first time you're hearing about it. I kind of dug deep for this one. So what are your thoughts as I'm telling you this, or had you heard this already?
Yeah, I hadn't heard it because I don't follow mainstream guys too much when it comes to 49ers talk. But my answer would be duh, because we've known this for like a long time. I mean, Shanahan said in the coaches weekend or whatever, when they were interviewing him at the breakfast table when he was all top button gang like I always am, he said like they knew enough about Trey last season, which is why they were willing to trade Jimmy early in the offseason, right? And so I think that this was always like a foregone conclusion, just because I guess Shanahan is holds everything very close to his chest as far as decisions that he's going to make, that it gave people the ability to create different narratives that they weren't excited about Trey or haven't seen enough about Trey and so on and so forth. But if you're anybody that pays attention to the words that were actually coming out of the mouth of Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, this is much ado about nothing. Trey was always going to be the starter. They had already seen enough out of him to believe that he was worthy of being the starter. And I think they've geared a lot of their offseason as far as the coaches that they brought in and the personnel that they've kept on the team to gear it around Trey Lance being the starter. So for me, I don't think they just saw enough. I think they've been seeing enough, and this is just the national media catching up.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. What I would say is they probably got the confirmation that they were hoping for, right? They didn't go into this saying, hey, we got to see if Trey's really made of this. We think this is what he's made of. We are turning the team over to him regardless. But you certainly want to see good things. And I think that they got the confirmation that they were looking for over the course of this 2 weeks. And really, it showed itself not only physically, but again, mentally, just the way that he carried himself, the way that teammates talked about him. And I think most importantly, the way that the defense talked about him, because those are the ones that have to face him every day. Those are the ones that know what to expect and kind of have an idea of what's coming next. And they're still getting torched a little bit by Trey Lance. And I think that right there is all they needed to know about Trey Lance. And I love this for Trey Lance because I still think that the team would have been his, but if Jimmy wasn't hurt, I'm very curious to see how that whole situation would have played out, right? Would he have shown up? Would they have split reps? I don't know. I mean, we don't know the answer to that question, but we do know that Trey Lance did get 100% of the reps, which I think is extremely important for his growth. I think that his growth, by the way, from this time to training camp is going to be the biggest growth that he makes this offseason. You hear that a lot about quarterbacks. You hear a lot of quarterback coaches talking about that. And so I'm really excited to see that growth as they get into training camp because I think it's going to be a lot bigger leap in these, 2 months or so, or month and a half, I should say, than what people realize. Because now they have, all right, you've worked with the team. The team now has feedback to give to your coaches. And so you can work specifically on those things. And so I'm very curious to see how much even more improved he looks when he comes back. The whole situation is exciting, but yes, I agree. Trey Lance is the starter. We knew Trey Lance was the starter, but it is nice to hear that they got that confirmation.
I think, to the point that you made, you were interested to see what would happen if Jimmy was healthy. What would have happened if Jimmy was healthy is the 49ers would have been able to trade him. And it would have been how high of a pick that could they have gotten for Jimmy. I don't think there was any chance Jimmy was ever going to be competing for reps in a training camp. I think they made the decision very early on this offseason that Trey Lance was going to be the starter. That's why they gave Nate Sudfeld the money they gave him. And that's why, Jimmy is not in the facilities.
Absolutely. Ooh, this is a really good question. Outside of Lance, which second year QBs will take the biggest leap? Oh man. Wow, that's tough. I think really you could make a case for all of them. I'm gonna
Well,
go. Yeah, go ahead.
so I would take Mac out of it because I think Mac Jones to what a leap
Kind of
that he
is
can.
what he. Yeah,
Yeah, I think he's kind of going to be just consistent. So he's going to probably be one of the better performing quarterbacks out of second year quarterbacks. But I don't know how much better he's going to perform from last year. So I would say he's kind of like going to be even out. So as far as leap, maybe not there. I would say Justin Fields in my estimation. Lance and Justin Fields were the two quarterbacks I was most excited about in the draft that year. I think that Justin Fields has a lot of the same intangibles that Trey Lance has. I haven't been following him as much because I don't obviously follow the Bears, but I wouldn't be surprised if similar stories that we're hearing about Trey Lance from the local media here, as far as work ethic and what he's doing, as far as being a leader of his team and all those type of things, are the same things that Justin Fields is. Stories about Justin Fields are being written as well. And this is his chance to be the full-time starter, right? They don't have really any competition in the quarterback room as far as who's going to start over him. So my guess, just because of opportunity, is going to be Justin Fields, with the kid from Houston being a close second.
Davis Mills. Oh, okay.
Davis
I
Mills,
like it.
yeah.
I like it. I actually. So I'm gonna take it back. Before the draft, I said that Trey Lance was my number 2 quarterback. I had him ahead of Fields and Wilson and Mack and those guys. To your point, Mack had a pretty good rookie year, so I think the leap is not going to be as big as it could be for some of these other guys. The only guy that I had ranked ahead of Lance was Lawrence. And I think Lawrence was in a really, really bad situation last year, not only from a talent aspect, but I mean, the coaching situation was absolutely crazy. They've got some stability there, at least as far as that goes. And I think that he's the only one, when it's all said and done, that actually has a chance to be better than Trey Lance potentially. And so with that being said, I have to go with him, because if I don't go with him, then it's kind of going back on my whole original thought of who was the best out of all the quarterbacks. And so, although I'm not as confident that he will end up being better than Trey Lance, I still think he's right there. And Lawrence, I mean, just in college, the kid was unbelievable. I mean, absolutely special talent. I gotta believe that that's still there. And he had a really, really bad rookie year. He just did, and that's not a knock against him. A lot of rookies had bad rookie years. That's part of learning the league. But I think he's the one that, in my opinion, will take biggest leap.
Yeah, I mean, well, to be determined. Only thing I could say is, usually new coaching staff, getting used to new weapons and all that kind of stuff. It's not like he had a lack of weapons last season. He still had a really good running back. He had some pretty decent receivers. And DJ Moore, I think, is a very underrated receiver that he had. And so to be determined.
Let's be clear. He didn't have DJ Moore plays in Carolina.
I mean, who's the guy that they have over there? Chenault, sorry. Chenault, who's a very underrated receiver over there. So I think he had some talent there, but definitely the coaching, just the storylines that were coming out of there, and they don't have a very good defense. So yeah, we'll see. I'm still going with Justin Fields.
All right, totally fair. And by the way, I could see anybody saying Fields or Zach Wilson. I don't know that was a great question, by the way, Randa. That was a hell of a question, and I really think you could go with any of those guys and probably feel pretty confident about it. So I understand people in the chat saying Wilson or Fields and you saying Fields. I totally get it. All right. So Fowler gave us this topic, but he also gave us this one. He said that he talked to, it's always anonymous, right? An anonymous NFC coach who believes that Shanahan's mind was changed by the fans in drafting Trey Lance, that he certainly wanted to go with Mac Jones. Mac Jones was always going to be the pick. And once they tested the waters and it was out there for everybody to see, they saw the uproar, essentially, that fans did not want Mac Jones at 3. We know how that whole situation went and that he ultimately changed his mind. What say you about this one, Sunil?
Yeah, because he cared so much about the fans' opinion when they could get Tom Brady in there. And because of the fans, he brought Tom Brady in. Wait, that didn't happen. And then the fans wanted to bring in, Matt Stafford. There was everybody talking about bringing in Matt Stafford. And then he brought in Matt Stafford, right? No, wait, that didn't happen. Yeah. Then, the 49er fans wanted them to go after one of these top tier wide receivers. And, they brought in one of those top tier wide receivers, right? No, wait, that didn't happen. Or then, the fans wanted them to bring in maybe a top tier defensive end or safety or center. And those happened too, right? No, that doesn't happen. But it was just this one thing all of a sudden, Kyle Shanahan's like, the biggest coaching decision I've ever had to make on this team, as far as trading up all of my future capital to be able to go up and get a quarterback that I'm going to be tied to for the rest of my career. Let me put that in the hands of the faithful. Yeah, that's the time that he decided to go listen to the faithful. I call complete BS on this just because Shanahan is too arrogant, and I don't say that in a derogatory term. He's too arrogant in the sense that he believes that he knows what he's doing too much to give any credence to us as far as that decision making. So I say complete BS. He wanted Trey Lance because Trey Lance fit his scheme, and I think you were one of the first people that were on it and broke it down extremely well as far as why Trey Lance was the pick over anybody else from that draft class.
Well, Runa, this came when you called me Jack.
Right.
Just to be clear, he says Jack and Jesse don't even rhyme. Sunil, leave Jesse and find Chill. You can go up the hill. By the way, so I already talked early about some of the OGs being in the chat when Pinor popped in and Tommy and some of those other guys. but we had Shardall come in. We've had Waruna in here. This is great. It's awesome. I love having 200 plus people in the chat, but I remember when the chat had like 6 people in it on a regular basis. And some of those OGs were riding with me from the very, very beginning. I appreciate you guys, and it feels kind of old school family in here right now. I absolutely love this. Thank you for Waruna for the super chat. Appreciate you. You know how we do around here. You've been here since the beginning. We always show love for super chats, and here's how we do it. All right. Here's my opinion on this whole thing. It's complete BS. You're absolutely right. All those other situations where 49er fans wanted certain things to happen with this team definitely did not come to fruition. Shanahan's career was on the line with this move, right? Potentially. And so, of course, he's going to take who he wants. In fact, we've even heard rumblings. I've posted text messages that I had in November saying that the 49ers and Rich Scangarello and Wes Welker were going to part ways at the end of the season because of the disagreement around Trey Lance. And then, of course, those things happened, right? So I don't believe it for a second. I think that Shanahan was all in on Trey Lance. The reason that they jumped to 3 was to jump the Falcons and the Panthers, who both had reported interest in Trey Lance. And I think that that was the pick, right? I do think that the 49ers preferred to have a veteran quarterback. I think that's why they kicked the tires on the Watson thing and had that whole situation not come together the way that it did, unfortunately. I believe that Watson would have been a 49er. That didn't happen. Stafford, they were a little bit late on the jump there and getting Matt Stafford. And then even on draft day, they did look into getting Aaron Rodgers because I think ultimately Kyle Shanahan prefers veterans, right? There's a reason why he tried his best to not play Trey Lance, even if he was the better quarterback out the gate, because he just wants to give him proper time to get ready. And so, with that being said, I think once they knew they were picking at 3, it was Trey Lance. It was always going to be Trey Lance, unless for some reason he had gotten taken with one of the first 2 picks, which was highly, highly unlikely. So, yeah, I'm with you. I don't think the fans changed the mind at all of Shanahan, but it's a fun story. I mean, it's something fun to talk about for sure.
I wonder, let's guess, who do you think is the NFC unknown coach? What team, what organization do you think he came from?
It's probably Green Bay. Because think about it, right? Remember the whole situation, like Shanahan and LaFleur are boys, and then they reach out the day of the draft to see if Aaron Rodgers is available, and LaFleur is not happy. He gets cold feet. They're not friends anymore. There's a little bit of a grudge. I could see it being them. I really could see it being them. What about you? Who do you think it would be?
I think it's McVay's staff, because
Really?
they're the most in competition. McVay kind of won up Kyle Shanahan through getting, Stafford, playing that whole thing to where he got Stafford when Kyle Shanahan obviously was going all in on Stafford. So I think just try to throw some more smoke towards the 49ers, who is clearly their biggest competition this season. I think it coming from the Rams organization. That's all feelings over facts. I have absolutely no proof for that.
Of course we have no idea. No, of course
So,
not.
But for me, I'm going with the sneaky Rams.
All right, I like it. Miliano wants to know if we get anything for outstanding attendance. You're right. There are some of you that haven't been here since the beginning, but you certainly, once you came on, you rocked with me hard. Listen, the fact that we have 200 people in this chat less than a year into this thing, it's incredible. You guys are all so fantastic. Gratitude. My heart goes out to you. I appreciate each and every one of you. I really, truly do. A lot of you really rock with me tough, man. It means the absolute world to me. It really does. So all of you, just because you weren't here from day one doesn't mean that it's not appreciated as much. It's just, I like that family vibe, right? people that are really close friends with me. I keep a tight knit circle in real life, and people that I really rock with, I rock with tough. I think that situation played out over social media with the whole Grant situation for me. I really rock with people tough. And so once you're in that inner circle, you're like family to me. And so all of you guys that rock with me the way that you do, I really genuinely appreciate it, because to me, that's that family vibe that I absolutely love. So thank you all for doing that. That, however, is the show for tonight. So make sure, if you're not subscribed and you want to be a part of things here, that you do subscribe to the channel. You hit the bell notification so you never miss an episode. And link is in the description for you to do the same thing over at Sunil's channel, who is here every single Tuesday. Sunil, thank you as always for joining me. Chat, peace.